Now please join me in welcoming Soto Zen priest and Dharma teacher, Reverend Zenkyu Jerry Smyers, who will present the Buddha Way, reflecting on the heart of Buddha's teaching.
Well, good morning, everyone. Lovely to be here.
Microphone?
A little higher. Is that better?
Yes.
Good. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, lovely to be here this morning. Thank you for inviting me. And yeah, I haven't been to a Unitarian church in some time. Let me know where I sign up. Very nice to be here. So yeah, I've got a few things I'd like to say. Buddhism, I'm not sure how much Buddhism is understood or appreciated. I'm sure very appreciated, but maybe less known about by all of you. But I would like to just share a little bit about some of the key wisdom. We don't have a lot of time, but I want to share. That's what I want to do this morning. And the anniversary of the Buddha's awakening is always celebrated on December 8th. So it's known as Rohatsu. And what does Rohatsu mean in Japanese? It means December 8th. So it's very, very simple, very simple. And but this is historically when the Buddha woke up after long struggles. And so I want to go into this just a little bit, and I want to talk about what he gained from this search. So this is what we'll talk about, and I'll come out the other side and we'll try to frame what Buddhist practice is about for everybody to appreciate. So unbelievably, the Buddha, this was 2,500 years ago. It's like more than 500 years BC that the Buddha lived. And he was born, and he had great promise. They said that he would either become a great ruler or he would become a spiritual teacher. And his father was the ruler of the kingdom that they were in, the Shakya tribe. And so, but what really happened was the father, of course, wanted the Buddha to follow in his footsteps. But what really happened, so he kept everything going really smooth for Siddhartha. And by the way, he was given the name Siddhartha, which I may be getting ahead of myself. I am, yes. We'll come to that. But the father tried to make everything perfect for the son, so that he would not want for anything or not question anything too much. But nonetheless, the Buddha was very struck when he saw people suffer. And he went all in on why do people suffer? And, it's amazing, to frame, the main issue of that is bothering you and is driving where you want to go in terms of let's solve this problem, was this very problem. Why do people suffer? And of course, we all experience suffering. We know about suffering. And so the Buddha wanted to know why people suffer and how do we do something about it? How do we overcome suffering? So it's a foundational question, of course. And so when Siddhartha was born, that was the name given. The name Siddhartha means one who has attained their goal. So it was quite, quite auspicious, let's say, to have this kind of name based on how he delivered. And finally, this climaxed when when Siddhartha went to all the different gates of the castle, the palace, and he went to the east gate and he saw an old man, frail. He went to the south gate and he saw a man sick from disease and was crippled. He went to the west gate and he saw a corpse and a funeral procession and the sorrow around this. And then finally he went to the north gate and he saw a holy man who was a sage who was carrying himself in a very dignified manner. And so this is just sort of a story that sort of capsulizes this dilemma that the Buddha found about suffering in life, and especially of the common people. And so after this, at around the age 29, he decided to leave the palace. He left in the middle of the night, telling no one, left, and he went up into the mountains. He was close to the Himalayas there. And but he studied from several of the most prominent teachers of that time. And invariably, with each teacher, he would learn what they were teaching, but it still did not answer for him the question of why people suffer. So then, another thing that was quite popular at this time, I know it's almost ironic to think about this being popular, but asceticism. And the idea was that if we diminish the body, somehow this will inspire our spiritual side. This was generally the thought about it. So for several years, he sat and did ascetic practices with 5 other monks. And so they would, basically it's self-torture. He held his breath, he fasted until his ribs became very prominent. He said that the rows of his spine he could feel from the front, So very, very, very serious. And so through this austerities, he didn't get any wisdom. He didn't get any answer to this question. He only got weaker. And so he realized this was not the way. And then he remembered once in his childhood, he had an experience where he spontaneously experienced bliss and entered nirvana, or I should say dhyana, which is a meditative state. And he decided to return to that practice. And he also decided to begin eating. And he had there's a wonderful story about a little girl who brought him milk and gave him some substance so he could start building his strength up again. And all of the other 5 ascetics, they said, well, he's given up, so we're going to shun him. And so the Buddha, Siddhartha, went on and gained more and more strength. And finally, he decided one night to sit in meditation, which was what he always was doing. Even through ascetic practices, they would sit in meditation. And but he said, I'm going to sit in meditation until I find the root of this problem, or else he would perish. So this was how extreme he got to this point. And many things happened that night that he got awakening from. And on the morning of December 8th, the morning star appeared, and Siddhartha had a great awakening, and he became the Buddha. And he said, how amazing that all living beings have the basic awake nature, yet they do not know it. So he's saying that we all have Buddha nature, or if you'd prefer, we all have Christ's nature within us. This is all part of us, except we aren't aware of it. Let's see. How amazing. So we endlessly drift on the ocean of great suffering because we are not aware of our own completeness. This is the fundamental problem. And so all beings are Buddha, and Buddha means awakened one, one who is awake to things the way they really are without coloring and attaching to individual conditioning, my own conditioning, my own opinions, my own baggage, my own karma that I'm carrying around with me. And so this is what is keeping me from seeing my true nature, this self-centeredness. Fundamentally, just say it in one word, all of our self-centeredness, where it's me, this is how I am, this is me, and if other people's don't conform, then there's a barrier, and so all of this builds up, and we have the world that we have. So the Buddha went on to teach. I'm kind of fast forwarding through this story, so understand I could go into great minutiae, but no need. We'll be fine. The first thing that he taught was called the Four Noble Truths, and it's arguably he spoke. He amplified on this for the rest of his life. But this was the basic foundation for his teaching. And the very first thing that he said was the first noble truth is, guess what? Life is suffering. And, it's like the world exists, reality is one thing. How we view reality is another. And the farther that gap between what I feel is reality, my personal opinion about what reality is, and true reality, the larger that gets, pretty much the more I suffer, the more I suffer. And so reality versus my opinion about reality. In other words, if we can just let go of our self-centeredness and return to this moment and who I am, this is what the Buddha is pointing to. And he said, number 2 is the cause of suffering is attachment, self-centered thirst, craving, desire, longing. And in Buddhism, there's the 3 poisons. The 3 poisons of greed, hate, and delusion. Which we all know about these things, to some degree or another, in ourselves and in others. All 3 of these poisons bind us to the world of suffering. And attachment to self-centered views, this is really what brings this on. So we're the artist of our own suffering. We're the artists of our own delusions. And so this is number 2. Why? Why do we suffer? Number 3, this is what we would say is the good news. The good news is this can be overcome. And by letting go of self-centeredness and the 3 poisons. And then he gave sort of a way to approach this, which is number 4, which is called the Noble Eightfold Path. And the Noble Eightfold Path include these things: right view and right effort. So this is kind of like, what are our intentions? What are our intentions in life? Do we want to take advantage of everybody else? Do we want to be in harmony with everybody else? But this will frame our view and how we affect that view in our effort. And obviously in this world, we project things on the world through thought, speech, action, and our livelihood. And then the other ways that we can continue to cultivate our true nature is through mindfulness, being aware of what's going on in this present moment. This moment is the only moment we have. The future never arrives. The past is always gone. We can plan for the future. We can learn from the past, but everything we do is in this moment. And so to live wholeheartedly in this moment, this was the Buddha's teaching, and learning how do we do that. This is very important. And so again, as I said, this was his marker. This is the essence of what he learned, and he embellished upon this he had a 45-year teaching career, which is astounding when we think about it now. He had that long so there are many, many writings, all quite inspiring and helpful. And so what I'd like to do for the sake of time, this will, I think, help. This is, there are many branches, like there are branches of Christianity in Buddhism. Zen is the branch that I am most interested in and practice in, and so meditation. Meditation is at the heart of all Buddhist teachings, so all denominations, but some emphasize that and other things more. Zen practice most emphasizes the heart of how Zazen, Zen meditation is important. And I want to move and pivot just a little bit. I want to talk about something that Dogen Zenji said. Dogen lived in the 1200s in Japan, and he was the founder of our school, the Soto Zen school in Japan, which came from China. And so he said it this way. He said, to study Buddhism is to study the self. So if you think about Buddhism, you might think, gee, what is studying Buddhism? I have to read all these books. I have to, memorize all these things. It's like there's so much information over hundreds of years. Not true. This is just, these are fingers pointing in the right direction maybe, but from Dogen's standpoint and the way we look at it is studying the self, and we do this through our meditation practice. We sit cross-legged, we sit up nice and straight, and we sit in a very grounded way, we sit in a balanced way, and we just look at this present moment, and we see what comes up. And so we see all kinds of thoughts arise, and craziness, and incessantly, but over time, as we do this practice and we learn to let go of our attachments, it gets quieter, and gets quieter. But let me finish what Dogen had to say. He says, to study Buddhism is to study the self, to get to know yourself. And to study the self is to forget the self. And so what he means by this is, as we learn and look at ourselves, we begin to see this self-centered tendency that we have within us more and more. The thinking mind, and I may have ambitions to do this, and maybe that takes advantage of over at this person. All of this, think about your thoughts that come up all day. They keep percolating up, and we're not going to stop those thoughts. This is our natural state, but we don't have to live from our thoughts. We can live in this moment free of attachment to anything. And if we are just thinking our life rather than living our life, this is sometimes kind of what a lot of us feel like we're doing. So the more we understand this self-centeredness under which we operate, the more we can let go of it. So that's what he means by forget the self. Forget that self-centeredness. And to forget the self is to be verified by all things, he said. And so the more we let go of our self-centeredness, now there's no barrier between me and everybody else. We're all one. We affirm our interdependence. Absolutely. We affirm our oneness, the oneness of all of us, and that kind of thing. And he said, finally, to be verified by all things is to let the body and mind of self. So when we say body and mind, we mean the body is our five senses. We learn from the world around us by our five senses, smell, taste, hearing, sight, feeling, and our thinking mind. So body is our five senses, mind is our thinking mind. So we're dropping body and mind, and we even drop body and mind of all of everyone else. And so in this way, another way to paraphrase it that I think may resonate more with all of you is, to study Buddhism is to study the self. To study the self is to come to know the self. We see the frailties and the issues. And then to come to know the self is to forget the self. We can let go of that more and more. We can let go of what we call this monkey mind, jumping around all the time. And to forget the self is to be in harmony with and oneness with all things. So in a nutshell, that 4-line, it sort of summarizes, this is really what Buddhism is. Sure, we have a lot of wonderful writings, we have a lot of wonderful teachings, but these are all, to read the teachings, this is intellectual knowledge. If you really want to understand what the Buddha, we have to walk, if the finger is pointing in that direction, this is what I advise, we actually have to walk that way and learn it for ourselves. We can't recite what somebody else learned and had wisdom and gain that for ourselves without our experience of it. So I think I'm running long, but anyway, I do want to share one more thing, which I think is really quite sweet. This is again from Dogen, and I'll maybe close with this idea. But this is from one of his writings called the Genjo Koan, which Genjo Koan really kind of literally means the problem of life, the challenges of life. And he says, conveying oneself toward all things to carry out practice enlightenment is delusion. So when we conveying oneself, so often we are projecting ourselves on the universe. My opinion on the universe. Oh, here's what I think about that. And on we go. And we're losing, the more we do that, this is our self-centeredness. This is the delusion. This is how we create delusion. I hope that makes sense and is clear. He goes on to say, all things coming and carrying out practice enlightenment through the self is realization. If we are open in Zazen and in Zen practice, we allow the universe to inform us. We're not, the Buddha called this outflows. When we're always projecting ourselves on the world, and want the world to behave the way we think it should, this is outflows. And so to cut back on those outflows, and in this way we allow the universe to inform us. Allow the Buddha, allow God to inform us. This is so. But we have to, like a pond. If the wind is blowing across a pond, the wind of our self-centeredness and our agitation, our unsettledness, the surface of the pond is very clouded. We can't see anything into it. But as the wind dies down, as our monkey mind settles down more and more, the surface of the pond becomes crystal clear and flat, and we can see deeply into our own true nature. So this is the idea of Buddhism, and this is the practice. And it takes practice, and it's not a quick fix. We've spent many years and much time in getting us where we are. So to unwind some of this, it takes practice and determination. And so I hope that made sense. And maybe that's a good place to bring it to closure, but I don't know if we have time for questions or anything like that. But very nice to talk with you all, I hope. And by all means, catch me afterward and would be happy to speak with any of you. All right.
It seems a moment when I should tell some of you who might not know this that Southwind Sangha actually was in this church for quite a while, and then it moved elsewhere. And we still have Zen Friends of Wichita, and those of us who are involved in it really feel that Buddhism is part of the huge body of knowledge that informs Unitarian Universalism, all those sort of sources of human thought and activity, and Buddhism is a large part of it. and you listen to a talk like that, you see how it all fits. Thank you, Reverend Zen Q, Jerry Smyers, for that marvelous sermon.